Welcome everyone to today's virtual tour of ecomaine. My name is Chrissy Adamowitz and I am the Sustainable Maine Outreach Coordinator for the Natural Resources Council of Maine. For those of you who are new, NRCM is a nonprofit membership organization protecting, restoring, and conserving Maine's environment now and for future generations. For 60 years, the Natural Resources Council of Maine has been protecting the places that make Maine so special. NRCM harnesses the power of the law, science, and the voices of more than 25,000 supporters statewide and beyond. And today we are very lucky to have Vanessa Berry. She is an environmental educator and recycling expert at ecomaine. Vanessa provides education and resources to member communities and residents with the goal of encouraging others to follow the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Vanessa started her career working for public schools and special education and overseeing an after-school green team, and transitioned from the classroom to commit a year to serving low-income Mainers through efficiency upgrades and education before joining the ecomaine team in 2018. Vanessa also serves on NRCM's Rising Leadership team, so you may see her in a lot of our events and things. She's a great leader. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few logistical items. First, today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be emailed to you tomorrow so that you can share it with your friends and family, or if you need to go back and if you had a question about something we said, it's there for you. For the duration of the presentation, your audio will be muted and your video will be turned off so as not to disrupt the presentation. We've also planted some poll questions throughout the presentation so that we can learn from you. And we have Todd Martin here today to help you with any tech problems. You can message him directly using the chat box if you have any technology questions. After the presentation, we'll have time for questions and you can submit them via the chat box. But we've done this before and we found that a lot of your questions will be answered throughout the presentation because Vanessa is so good at answering questions. So, but again, try to save them to the end because a lot of them will be answered throughout the presentation. And that's my bit. So Vanessa, take it away when you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys so much for being here. We already have 73 people on this call, so that feels really good. Lots of people eager to learn more about their recycling systems and kind of how it works here in Maine and particularly in ecomaine communities. I will just put out a disclaimer. This is ecomaine's program specifically. If you live in a non-ecomaine community, and we'll look at that map in a minute, your program might be a little bit different. So you're definitely going to want to do your own homework and figure out, where your stuff goes and all that stuff. But we'll talk about that later. But we'll get right to the virtual tour. You guys are going to get to see all the equipment running the material through the plant. And then if you have questions about particular things, like please feel free to use the Q&A. I will kind of ask for some, participation in the chat. And feel free to use that if you want. And then, we'll talk a little bit about how recycling systems can also relate to some of the work that NRCM is doing. So we'll kind of translate how this could help recycling and good policies that NRCM is advocating for can support ecomaine and create a more sustainable state. So we'll get right to it. The first thing we want to do is start off with a poll question. So we're going to ask you guys to select which of the following items are recyclable in a single sort recycling program. So this is what kind of stuff is recyclable at ecomaine's single sort facility. So click all of the ones that apply. We'll look at the responses and then I'm going to give you the answer right away. We usually hold off on giving folks the answers, but I think this time around we'll give you that feedback right out of the gate. And then we can explain the why in the tool and like during the tour. So.
All right, they're coming in fast.
Yeah, they look good.
All right, getting there. Okay, I'll end the poll in a few seconds. Give you a few more seconds. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. All right, so I'm gonna share the results. Here's what we've got. So 25% say paperclip is recyclable, 37% bottle caps, 83% milk cartons, 94% laundry detergent jug, 48% individual plastic lids, 11% alkaline batteries, 94% magazines, 43% coffee cups. So Vanessa, what are the results? How did we do?
All right, let's look at those results. So yeah, milk cartons are absolutely recyclable. Laundry detergent jugs, good to go. Magazines, coffee cups, and pots and pans. Is pots and pans on that survey? I don't see it.
There it is at the bottom.
Oh, it's at the bottom. Okay, cool. Well, that one was a surprise because a lot of people did not respond to that one with, that it was recyclable. So that's a fun fact. We do take pots and pans in our single sort system. Very cool. So yeah, those are in a nutshell. We'll go through the virtual tour and hopefully it'll make sense why we take some of these, but not others. But yeah, it's good to get that feedback. And I'm going to save those results so that I can think about that and, cover some misconceptions that people might have. Let's see. All righty. So we'll press on. ecomaine, I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, what other parts of ecomaine are kind of involved in waste in the state of Maine. But just in a nutshell, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're community owned. So we actually have 20 owner municipalities. We'll look at that map in a minute and you get to see, maybe ecomaine, maybe your town owns a part of ecomaine, which would be really cool. We're owned by 20 municipalities. We manage municipal solid waste, or MSW, and recycling. We have 3 facilities. We operate most of these right on Outer Congress in Portland, Maine, just 2 miles from the Jetport. We've got our waste to energy power plant, which is right off Highway 95, right by the Jetport exit. You can actually see our stacks from the highway. We also have our recycling facility. That's our single sort recycling program, which is right next door on the same campus as the waste to energy power plant. And then just a couple miles down the road, we have our own Asheville slash landfill facility. And we can talk about that if you guys have questions. But that's just down the street, kind of over in the more industrial side of, Outer Congress, over by County Road and Spring Street. We're just right over there, tucked away. You can find us on Google Maps pretty easily, but you can check that out as well. We process and accept more than 175,000 tons of trash and 35,000 tons of recycling every year here at our facilities. So we want to make sure that we're encouraging people to follow those 3 R's, like I mentioned before, the reduce, reuse, recycle. If we're recovering as much material as humanly possible, we're not sending so much to trash. I'll talk about that too. But we are a pretty large facility and we service about 1/3 of the state's population. Looking at our map here, I want you guys to use the chat to let us know if you are an ecomaniac or not. Do you live in one of our ecomaine communities? I've got the full map right here. This is effective Saturday because we just added Kennebunkport to our service area on Saturday. Very exciting. So this is the most recent map we have. Are you an ecomaniac? Do you live in one of our towns? Let us know in the chat. It's always good feedback to just kind of hear, maybe you are, maybe you're not yet. Maybe that's something that you could do a little advocacy in your communities to get on the ecomaine train. But yeah, let us know. Lots of folks from our towns, very exciting. So I'm seeing Saco, Kennebunkport, Portland, awesome. Cumberland, Kittery, Woolwich.
Vanessa, I saw one question. Somebody asked what was the difference between the green pins and the yellow pins?
Yes, so those are about types of contracts. So our owner communities are the ones in green. So if you are a green pin like Portland, South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, Scarborough, you are an owner community of ecomaine. Those 4 that I just listed are actually the original 4 owners of our company. So Portland, South Portland, Cape, and Scarborough all got together back in the 70s and established ecomaine, formerly Regional Waste Systems, if you're familiar with our former name. We've been ecomaine since 2006, and we've been growing ever since. That's when we kicked off our single sort recycling program. So we kind of gave ourselves a new name to kind of establish and rebrand with kind of what's actually happening here at our facilities. A little cuter than Regional Waste Systems, I'll add too. But yes, so thank you guys for your feedback. It's good to hear kind of where everybody's coming from, but we'll keep going. So before we had waste to energy technology, like I said, we've been doing this, for a little while. Our waste to energy facility has been around since 1988. So we've been doing that for a while. And recycling started here in 1990. But back then it was a different program, not the single sort we know today. But before we had those programs, all of our waste in the greater Portland area and mostly throughout Maine was disposed of in landfills. And obviously, we know that landfills are not a great long-term sustainable waste management solution, because essentially what we're doing is we're taking our household trash and we're burying it underground for the next generation to deal with. There's lots of issues that kind of surround landfilling and that process. And land use is a big one. We're running out of space to store all of this garbage, and nobody really wants a landfill in their backyard. We also have methane emissions that are released through the storing of trash in a landfill. There's leachate, which is basically contaminated water that can enter our groundwater and other water systems in our area. There's the risk of having pests and other vectors. So you can see in this photo, which is, I believe, a photo of Hatch Hill and Augusta, which is the landfill I grew up using as a kid. But seagulls, bald eagles, you might see bears, raccoons, rodents, all of those critters trying to eat up all that garbage, and probably lots of toxic things in that process too, things that are not very good for them. And then one of the last concerns, and probably one of the most important ones for a lot of financially minded people, is the cost of landfilling. It's very expensive to open a landfill because you got to buy all that land, put in all of the environmental protections to prevent the methane and the leachate and all of that stuff. And then to close and cover and cap and monitor and maintain those landfills is an expense that happens generations and generations, beyond the closure of that landfill. You still got to take care of it even after it's closed. So those expenses don't just go away, and that trash doesn't just go away. So quick pop quiz, the status of Maine's landfills. So how many years do you all think that it would take to fill all of Maine's open landfills if we continue throwing things away at the same rate that we are right now? So think about that, fill out that poll question. What do you think?
We got a lot of people going for 16 years.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't speak. I don't want to sway any of the results. All right, let's see. I'll give it a few more seconds.
Yeah, we've got 85% voted.
All right, I'm going to close it. 3, 2, 1.
All right.
All right. Here are the results. So 62% say 16 years, 28% say 22 years, 4% 29 years, and 6% 43. Excuse me. Vanessa, what's the truth?
All right. So the 28% have it. So we have about 22 years of active landfill use before all of our existing Maine landfills are filled up with garbage. And so what do we do from there? Once we've filled and reached capacity on all of these landfills, we could expand them, make them bigger, which nobody wants. We could, clear cut some of Maine's pristine forests to store our trash in some of this open area that's unoccupied, which is not ideal and we don't want. Or we could export our trash and send it out of state, which could be really expensive. And we don't want. So the only real strategy for, this deadline, kind of watching this ticking clock, is to really stall the rate of closure by reducing, reusing, recycling, composting, and implementing all of those diversion strategies before we landfill.
Vanessa, there's an interesting question. Do you know how much of that is because of out-of-state waste coming in?
That rate is actually based on Maine disposal of Maine waste. So I used that data was something that I kind of tabulated. Out-of-state waste is not actually factored here. I don't think it's a very large percentage of the material that is coming into the state as a whole. But I mean, it certainly doesn't help to have out-of-state waste coming in to the state and helping, accelerate that rate of closure. But when we look at other states in the New England region, and especially Southern New England, they're reaching capacity of their landfills now. So we look at places like Massachusetts and New York, where a lot of their material is being exported to other states. It's being, put on trains and sent out to Ohio and other states that have more landfill capacity. And I certainly don't think that that's a very long-term sustainable solution for managing solid waste. And I'm sure that others feel the same. But one thing that ecomaine does, really firmly believe in is the solid waste hierarchy. So this slide right here kind of shows it best. These are strategies to manage waste before considering landfill. This is a list of priorities that was created by the EPA and then has been kind of adopted in the state of Maine as well. So we want to exercise, source reduction, reuse of material, recycling, composting, and then use waste to energy technology to deal with the rest of the trash before ever considering landfilling of that material. So using these strategies is certainly going to help us. There's a kind of an outdated study now. It's from 2011 from the University of Maine, their waste characterization study. And it was pretty remarkable. It was about, I want to say, over 60% of what's discarded in Maine's waste stream today could be diverted through composting strategies, recycling, and other. So those materials do not necessarily have to go into the landfills. We just need better infrastructure in place to recover the material that people are disposing of to keep it out of the landfill. So things like that are really important. And ecomaine's mission statement does a really good job describing this. We provide comprehensive, long-term solid waste solutions in a safe, environmentally responsible, economically sound manner, because this doesn't make sense if we go bankrupt and we have to close, right? And we're a leader in raising public awareness of sustainable waste management strategies. So my job for ecomaine as an environmental educator is to encourage, people to consider, hey, have you thought about donating this item before you throw it away? Or your town doesn't have a recycling program. How can we facilitate that for you? So trying to encourage these upper rungs of the hierarchy before we ever consider landfilling the material. So we'll get started with that virtual tour. So regardless of how your stuff gets collected, we've got a cool video here of a curbside collection in South Portland. This is one of those dual-sided automated trucks for folks who have curbside recycling programs. Maybe they've got the automated trucks, maybe they've got manual trucks that are just, they've got somebody hanging off the back that's picking up the recycling bin and putting it into the back of the truck. Or maybe you're bringing your materials to a drop-off location. I know a lot of our rural Maine towns, they've got the transfer station, or they might have just a consolidated collection or one of our silver bullets, like that photo there in the top right-hand corner. Maybe they've got one of those containers, but no matter how it gets to us, we're gonna take it in any form. So that curbside or that drop-off is all gonna get to us all the same, and everything all in one bin. And then it comes here to ecomaine's facility on Outer Congress in Portland, and it's going to get dumped right out on our tipping hall floor here, and our front loader will do the rest. So he's scooping up that material, putting it onto our conveyor belts. And this is why, if you see this pile right here, this is why we really encourage folks to keep everything loose in their carts, keep them loose in their drop-off bins, because if it's bagged up here, it really can't get sorted correctly through the plant. And we manage a lot of material, 35,000 tons a year. We can process 18 tons an hour. So this stuff happens pretty quick, but it's not exactly the safest place for somebody to be out there ripping up bags and opening them out onto the tipping hall floor. So all the material ends up right here on this tipping hall floor. It does get evaluated for contamination. What you don't see in this video is taken before we started doing that. But we have somebody, his name is Ian, and he stands right on that tipping hall floor and grades every load of recycling that comes in. He'll do a little walk around and he'll let us know, if there are particular items of concern, and we communicate that with our towns. So if you live in one of our eco-maine towns and your recycling is coming to us, it definitely doesn't hurt to check in with your town office and just see how the recycling program's going. Maybe see if you can't get some of that information directly from the town on, hey, what's our contamination looking like? How can I help, solve that problem and reduce the amount of contamination that I'm putting in the recycling if I might be contributing to that. So check in with your towns and kind of see where you stand. But all the things that come through this facility get sorted out and processed through all of our equipment in 3 minutes or less. So it doesn't take very long for this material to find its home in the plant once it gets started.
Vanessa, we have a couple questions about shredded paper in clear plastic bags.
Yes, so that's a great question. I'm like losing my place on the slides. So yeah, so shredded paper is a conundrum because it's confetti if it's loose. So we do recommend that folks contain it using a clear plastic bag. And the reason for that is because once it's here at the facility, if it's in a brown paper bag or it's in a tall kitchen bag that's white or black, we can't see inside there to know what the contents are. So usually our staff have been trained to treat that as contamination. If they see anything bagged up, they've actually done a study on this on the tipping hall floor, and about 60% of the bags that we open in the plant are garbage. And I mean, as maybe somebody's using their recycling cart as a secondary trash cart. So we don't want to open dirty diapers and kitty litter and food waste and old shoes and all of that stuff that people are throwing away into the recycling stream. So our sorters have been trained that if they can't see the contents of that bag, they have to treat it as trash. And if it's in a clear plastic bag, we can see right inside there and we know what's inside. And that way the shredded paper stays contained. So it's not confetti going all over all of the equipment. And then it can get ripped open into the appropriate bale once, they can walk over to the paper line and they can just drop all that shredded paper right in there. So it just makes things more efficient for us to be able to see it, identify it, and recycle it correctly. But that's the only exception to the bags because that stuff is so light, but we can recycle it. So that's the one exception to the rule. I know it's when I get tripped up over all the time, and a lot of folks have lots of questions about it. So I'm glad that somebody brought it up. But yeah, so the first piece of equipment is actually meant to sort out our cardboard and our paper. We call them the rubber stars, and you can see them in action here. This is the cardboard sorting screen. I've got one of the rubber stars right here. And these are spinning on axles, and basically the light, fluffy, and flat stuff, mainly the cardboard here in this situation, because these are big rubber stars with lots of space in between. But the cardboard will float over the top. Everything else is meant to fall through and in between the stars. And you can see here, some of the stuff gets tangled. And there's, some other things like a laundry jug might float over the top. They can pull that out. We did see a bag of garbage right there. And there's other things that get tangled in this process as well. So, you can see somebody's banner from the 4th of July or a bed sheet or a long stretch of shrink wrap. That stuff tends to get tangled up in our equipment. And so we can't accept any of that here. You'll also see there's the paper sorting screen, which is up on a kind of an incline. And the paper just kind of pops over the top like popcorn. It just floats over the top of the screens, and everything that's not paper, because cardboard's gone, everything that's not paper, so that's the plastics, the metal, and the glass, is all going to fall through these screens and onto its own conveyor belt down below, where it'll keep going through the rest of the plant. So you can see here, the paper is doing a good job just kind of floating over the top. And then the rest of the stuff is falling through, going to keep on going. And you'll see here in just a second, yeah, there's a good view of the rubber stars. You can see them really spinning and getting to work. And the paper keeps going. And then there's an opportunity here after the paper gets sorted for somebody to go through and pick out any of the non-paper items that you might see in here. Plastic bags, if they don't get tangled, they do float up and act like paper. So they've got to pull that out there. But there's the tanglers in our rubber stars as they're trying to spin. So this is one reason we really do not want bagged recycling or plastic bags, because even if that bag bursts open and lets all the recyclables free, that bag is still in the recycling stream and is going to get wound up in these gears as they're trying to do their job. So eventually we'll have to shut down all of the equipment, because this is the first step in the process. So we'll shut down all of the equipment so that we can go and cut all of that stuff out with box cutters. And that can take our plant staff anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on what else is stuck in there. It could be metal cable. It could be maybe some string or rope. A lot of the time we get like textiles. Somebody's, given us a bed sheet or a t-shirt or something like that just gets wound up in there. And those can cause some complications and some shutdowns of our equipment, which makes our process a little bit less efficient as well.
I just want to chime in real quick, Vanessa. I'm noticing that we're getting more questions about specific materials, and they're good questions. And so I just wanted to let everyone know that we'll leave time for that at the end for specific materials. Vanessa will go through the questions and we'll answer them as best we can in groups. Okay?
Sounds good to me. Yes, so we've sorted out the cardboard and the paper. And like I said, we also have an opportunity here for manual sorters to kind of go through and pick on a conveyor belt line. I believe I've got a slide for that right next. Yep, right here. So they have an opportunity here to take out any of those plastic bags that might have gotten thrown into the recycling. We also get things like food waste or some other scary stuff like chainsaws. We've gotten that in there before, or propane tanks. We've gotten a couple samurai swords. We actually got one back in the fall, pretty scary. And so there's some misconceptions there. Some people, think, well, it's a scrap metal, so that can go in my single sort recycling container. But then they don't realize that ultimately there's a lot of people that work in this plant, and those kinds of items can be really unsafe for them and make their working conditions unsafe. So you've got to think about a little bit about the process and the procedure at which we sort the stuff. And then hopefully that'll help you make sense. Like maybe this doesn't go here. Maybe this is like a transfer station type of material, and help you navigate all of those things. We also have a ton of resources for education. And I'll talk about those closer towards the end of the presentation, but we have a wide array of resources for folks on our website, on social media, and we encourage people to use those at any opportunity, anytime they have a question. You should always know which bin those items should go in. And if you're ever in doubt and you can't find the answer, you can always reach out to us too. That's part of my job, is to be really accessible to the public. So that way, if there are nuanced questions, like, I don't know, I just got this new package in the mail and I don't know how to get rid of it, you can ask us before you throw. And that way we're not wish cycling or aspirational recycling, where we really hope that ecomaine can take care of something and then later find out that it's been a contamination and it's been causing us some problems. Because it only takes one samurai sword to shut us down for a week while we have to replace conveyor belts if they get broken. But also, we don't want to be sorting out 450,000 plastic bags because everyone's giving them to us. So we want to be really mindful of that. And just a reflection question for maybe towards the end of the presentation. Think about maybe one thing that you thought was recyclable, but then realized later that it wasn't. I try not to get too negative about things because we all make mistakes, and I'm definitely not a perfect recycler by any stretch. I didn't start that way, and I've learned a lot since I started working at ecomaine. But, this is my full-time job, and I still have items that I'm not sure about and I have to check. So it's important that we grow from that information rather than feeling guilty about, I've been putting plastic bags in my recycling. As long as you use this as kind of the jumping point to do better next time, then we're really happy with that. And we just encourage people to know with confidence before we put something in the bin. So the next thing that we sort out, we've taken out the cardboard and the paper. The next thing is our metals. And I really like to relate back to Toy Story 3. If you've ever seen it, it's a great movie. But there's a little scene in there that kind of brings this home. We use our magnet for our ferrous metals, things like soup cans. They get attracted to the magnet and then a conveyor belt will drag them away, very much like in Toy Story 3. And then the next kind of phase of this is our other metals, non-ferrous metals, things like aluminum. So our soda cans, our baking trays, aluminum foil, those sorts of things, they get repelled by a reverse eddy current. So basically it's a electromagnetic field that pushes the aluminum in the opposite direction. It just repels it into the right container. And so we do want to make sure that our containers are totally empty when we recycle them. I get a lot of questions about like the cleanliness of the materials. And for example, like a peanut butter jar, like how empty does it have to be? You like scrape as much out or empty as much out as humanly possible. You don't need to put anything in the dishwasher. But let's say I tried to recycle a piece of aluminum foil with an apple core in it. That food waste is going to make that heavy. And so that repelling motion from the reverse eddy current is not going to be enough to get it where it needs to go. The same goes for like a soda bottle. If you have a little bit of liquid still in there, that liquid is going to prevent that from going where it needs to go. So we just need to make sure that containers are totally empty before they go in the recycling bin. After we take out the metals, we also have a system to take out the glass. And the recycling process for glass is a little delicate because there's just not a lot of great recycling markets for glass out there, mainly because of the sheer weight of the material. So glass is really heavy. It's hard to transport from one facility to another. So what we do with our glass here at ecomaine is we repurpose it and crush it up using a closed metal container, and it's got rubber stars or metal stars inside, sorry. So very similar to our rubber stars, we have metal versions of these that spin on an axle and they crush the glass. So as that glass gets crushed, it goes into a trommel. We ground it down some more. It's actually pretty safe to touch. It's not in little, sharp bits. It gets ground down, so it's easy to, easy to use. And then it gets repurposed with other companies, construction companies, or even ecomaine sometimes repurposes the glass. And we can use it to make countertops. All of our countertops in our kitchens and our communal kitchens and the bathrooms of ecomaine's facilities all use recycled glass for their countertops, which really looks kind of cool. We also use it to replace gravel as an additive in our roadways out at the landfill because it's all dirt roads out there. Or to act as clean fill for development sites. So construction companies can come and take this stuff in, huge volumes by the dump truck load, and they can take this material to use as clean fill for a project. So it does get reused and repurposed, not traditionally recycled. So one thing that I will say is that part of our advocacy is also to encourage people to reuse glass as much as humanly possible. Those jars are still very valuable, even if they don't have that salsa in it anymore. There's good ways to clean those out and really repurpose them, use them to store dry goods or, for craft projects, you name it. I typically will hold on to my stuff and I'll take it to one of the zero waste stores around me and I'll refill them with, laundry detergent or shampoo and conditioner, you name it. But just repurposing those jars and giving them another life before we dispose of them. All right. And then the next thing we sort out is actually the last thing that we sort out. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We've got our plastics. And I'm going to pause this because it does happen really fast. So plastics are at ecomaine are accepted as long as they pass a 3-question test. Now that 3-question test is the first one. You're going to look for that recycling symbol with the chasing arrows and the triangle. You're going to want 1 through 7. That's the first question. So if it passes that test, that's number 1. The second one is it a rigid plastic? So for example, things like plastic bags are not rigid because they can stretch, they can rip. If you can crumple them all the way in your hand and make them disappear. If you throw them on the ground, they don't keep their shape. So those are kind of little tests that you can do. But if you can rip and stretch that plastic, then it's not a very rigid plastic. And then the last question is it a container? So lids by themselves, unfortunately, those are not a container by themselves. So if they're attached to a container, they're okay. But if you have, let's say, a paper coffee cup and a plastic lid, Those are two different materials that have two different recycling streams. So you're going to separate them, but the lid by itself actually can't get through the plant to get sorted correctly in with the plastics. It's light, it's fluffy, it's flat, and it's going to behave just like paper when it goes in through our sorting equipment. So as soon as it sees those rubber stars, it's going to go right in there and it's going to contaminate our paper bales. So lids by themselves are not recyclable at ecomaine, but if they're part of a larger container, keep those things together and they can go into the plastics as one unit. So the first thing that I'll talk about is the number 1 plastics, because we sort them by resin code, which is basically that number that's inside that recycling symbol. So number 1 plastics are the PET containers. Those are things like your water bottles, maybe a salad container from the grocery store, mouthwash, those kinds of containers, lots of those clear plastic. Those are number 1s, and they get scanned by our optical sorter. And so I'm going to show you a quick video of that, and just make sure you're watching really carefully because it's hard to see. But basically what it's doing is it's going to scan the plastics. It's looking for that number 1 plastic, that PET chemical makeup, because each of the resin coats has different chemistry that helps those plastic containers do their job. But it's going to look for the PET, and once it finds it, it gives a little puff of air to send it where it needs to go. So again, really important why we keep our containers super empty. So you can watch in this video, the material's coming right at us. It's gonna turn around and you can see all of the material going up and over the optical sorter. There's a bottle with a yellow top right here, and it just goes right up. I might play that one more time just in case you missed it, because it's super fast. So here's all that material going. It's gonna turn, and then I always look for that one container because it's really easy to find. But they just get a little puff of air and just pushed right over the top. There's the plastic. There it is. And hopefully you guys were able to see that. It happens pretty fast. But those things are really, really accurate. The only time that they're not successful is if there's food or excess food and beverages in the containers themselves. So just make sure that your containers are as empty as humanly possible. But no need to run anything through the dishwasher or really go and scrub everything, because they will get cleaned in the manufacturing process when they get chopped up and flaked up. They'll get cleaned at that point. So if there's a little bit of peanut butter in the jar, not a big deal. The rest of the plastics here, so we've just talked about number 1s, plastics 2 through 7 all get sorted out manually. So I've got a photo right here, just kind of in my bottom left-hand corner, of the folks on the sorting line in the plastic sorting room. We've got 3 categories for the rest of the plastics. We've got number 2 plastics that are natural colored, which are things like your milk jugs, maybe the jug of orange juice that you have, or apple cider or vinegar, those kinds of containers, that opaque, somewhat opaque plastic container. And then we've got the number 2 colored plastics, which are things like your laundry detergent jugs or shampoo bottles, or, if you've got the milk jugs that have been dyed white for the light block, those are included in colored plastics as well, because they've been dyed artificially. So there's 2 categories for those types of plastics. And then the 3 through 7 plastics all get baled up together as a mixed plastic bale. Now, some plastics are a little bit more valuable than others, which is why, and Chrissy will talk about this too, which is why we want to encourage manufacturers to push materials to things that are more readily recyclable. So things like number 1s and 2s are really easy for us to find homes for, and they usually are very valuable. Whereas sometimes those 3 through 7s can be a little bit more difficult to sell and more difficult for others to recycle. And based on our volume, because we take so much recycling for so much of the state, we are better equipped to find homes for that material, where a little town by itself that's trying to, recover this material might have a harder time. So recycling reform and this EPR model that we're going to talk about certainly supports those rural communities that are just doing the best with the materials that they're getting. And they do make it easier for us too, because they can reimburse those costs of having to recycle some of those things that are made of less valuable materials, and maybe shifting those products to be made with better materials as well. So after we've sorted all of this material, we do need to bale it up and get it ready to go into a truck. So I like to call this the giant Wally machine, but this is our Harris baler, which has been in the building since 1976. We used to use it to bale trash. It's now baling our recycling, and we've got those cardboard bales coming out now. And then our buddy Richard, who drives the forklift, is going to give this a visual inspection. He evaluates each of these bales as they come out just to make sure that everything looks good. He's just going to give it a quick spot check for quality control. And then once those are ready, they get stored. And when a truck is ready to come and take them, he's going to load them right up for them. We'll see that in just a second too. But yeah, these quality control inspections are pretty handy for us to do because we can take out little materials that we see. But if it's a large contamination issue in a bale, we can send that right back up into the recycling plant to get processed again. So for example, maybe we got a cardboard bale that came out that was half cardboard and half milk jugs. We might want to run that through the plant one more time just to make sure that it gets sorted correctly. And then it's truck day. In this video, he's going to load that up. And most of our markets and our end products are actually being processed somewhere within the eastern seaboard of the United States. Generally speaking, a lot of our markets are in North America. Sometimes we'll send some stuff up to Canada, like our cardboard might have a market up in Quebec, which sometimes is closer of a destination and cuts down on emissions more so than some of our other markets. But most of our stuff stays right here in the United States. Paper is one that sometimes has international markets, but a lot of the time now, especially in recent years, has been right here in the US. But you know, we used to rely on a lot of international markets in China and India and Indonesia, and a lot of those have started to dry up because of the levels of contamination in the industry. They're seeing too much trash and they've been closing down their doors, which is totally understandable. But we've been really lucky. We've got a very clean reputation. We've been working with lots of towns for a long time to get that education out there to folks. And so I think we've been blessed with really good domestic solutions for our processing. But that's not always the case for all plants. Some people had to rely on more international markets, which have been harder to find. All right. And then one of the really cool things, you know, more glamorous than landfill diversion is the fact that we can take all of this material from the recycling and turn it into something really useful and pretty neat. So just examples of materials that we take in the recycling and what they can turn into. I've highlighted some here. So your newspaper material can turn into construction paper. It can turn into brand new newspapers. We can use it for paper boards. So like your cereal boxes, a lot of the time, if you look inside there, you can see all the fibers from the recycled content that they use to make those cereal boxes. Same deal with egg cartons. You can really see the fibers in there, and they've used a lot of recycled paper to make those. Right now, with COVID and everything that's going on, a big market for recycled paper has been toilet paper. A lot of toilet paper manufacturers have been using post-consumer recycled content in their products because, you know, the supply and demand. So they've had to kind of offset the lumber industry that they've been using to make their toilet paper and buy post-consumer instead, which I think is kind of a bonus. But then plastic milk and juice bottles, those kinds of things. If you live in South Portland, there's a playground out at Willard Beach that's made entirely out of milk jugs. So that's pretty cool. But you can make lots of really neat things out of post-consumer plastics. You know, we have t-shirts made out of water bottles. There's all sorts of cool stuff that you can do with the material that comes out of the recycling facility. And I mentioned before, we have lots of resources, a huge array of, you know, informational materials at your fingertips. If you live in one of our towns and you're not sure how to get rid of something, you know, the rule of plastics right there, just in case you guys need a reminder. For plastics recycling, you need to make sure it's got that symbol on it. Numbers 1 through 7 are okay. It's got to be a rigid plastic and it's got to be a container. Once it passes all 3 of those, it's okay to put in the recycling bin. If you're still not sure, if you have an item and it's like maybe, you know, it's a weird package, you've never seen it before, use our Recyclopedia. That's a free app you can download on your smartphone, or you can go to ecomaine.org and you can find the Recyclopedia from there. But it's basically a huge database of over 1,300 items, and you can search you know, anything you can think of in that database, and we'll tell you, you know, best practices on how to get rid of it. And it's not just a one answer kind of solution. We want to advocate for composting, but let's say you don't have composting available in your house. You know, maybe that's a trash item. It's multi-steps depending on what you have access to. And we try to provide multiple solutions for people. So use that resource if you can. And then you can also reach out to us directly if you have other questions about recycling that you're not sure about, and you wanna kind of talk shop with one of us. All right, and now Chrissy, I'm gonna have you take it over to talk about recycling reform.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa. And I love all the good questions you guys are putting into the Q&A and chat box. Either one is fine, and we'll get to them at the end. But right now, I want to talk to you a little bit about what NRCM is doing on the policy side of things to make recycling better for everyone. So I'm going to start with this poll question. True or false, in other countries and provinces like those in the EU and Canada, corporations like Amazon, Walmart, McDonald's pay for municipal recycling programs instead of taxpayers? I'm going to launch that poll question right now. What do you think? It looks like you guys have been studying some of our educational materials. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds. All right, I'll end it. 3, 2, 1. And you guys are right, it's true. Believe it or not, the way other places do recycling is very different from the way we do recycling here in the United States, but NRCM is working pretty hard to change that and sort of come in line with the way other places do recycling. I hadn't shared the results, but here are the results. 84% of you say it was true. So let me tell you a little bit about recycling reform. Vanessa, if you would go to the next slide, please. So this is our logo, and you'll see this logo on our materials that talk about this particular policy issue. This is our biggest waste reduction policy for this year, and it has been for the past couple of years. And this is because global recycling markets have been unstable and have shown weaknesses in the way we do recycling, as Vanessa alluded to earlier. And as a lot of you are saying in your questions, and comments, a lot of towns have had to close or cut back over the past 2 years. I live in Brunswick, and unfortunately we had to cut glass out of our recycling, and we did that to save recycling because the other alternative was to cut it entirely. So that's happening all over the state. It was happening because of global markets, but now it's also happening again because of COVID. And the big problem and sort of like the highest issue with recycling is that there's no coordination between the people who are introducing packaging waste into our communities, namely producers and brand owners, and municipalities and facilities like ecomaine. There's no middleman coordinating any of it. And we just have to sort of hope that the system works. So the system that is done in other places around the world is formally known as extended producer responsibility. That term is a little bit jargony, I understand, but that's why we kind of call it recycling reform. But when you see the letters EPR or extended producer responsibility, just know that we're talking about the same thing as recycling reform. And what it does is it creates a coordinating body whose job it is to make recycling the best that it can be. And they basically they create a conversation between the brand owners and the municipalities and the towns to streamline the process. And then also, you all are really devoted. I can tell from your questions, you are devoted to recycling, and it's awesome. And it's great to see you be so devoted to recycling. And in my work and in Vanessa's work, we meet Mainers all over the state who work so hard on a volunteer basis to make recycling the best that it can be. But we're at a point where we really need the help from brand owners to sort of take the responsibility that they have in making recycling better. So Vanessa, if you would go to the next slide, some of the ways that this would help, this law would help us here in Maine with recycling. Off the bat, it saves taxpayers money by shifting the cost onto brands who are introducing waste into our communities in the first place. There's a lot of ways that brand owners can reduce waste, and they need incentives to do that. It creates a funding pot for towns to make investments in recycling infrastructure, and those investments can be education. My recycling committee in my town does education on a volunteer basis. And I don't know if that should be, I don't know if people should have to volunteer. I think that it should be somebody's job, and the people who are introducing waste should be responsible for paying for that education. So it creates funds for that and those investments. It also creates funds for investments in access, increasing access. And that means access geographically. So more rural places would have access to better recycling, but also access to different types of materials. I know some of you had questions about why doesn't my community take glass, or why doesn't my community take plastics 3 through 7? So increasing access for those particular materials too. It also importantly incentivizes less wasteful and excessive packaging. So, when you get a product that's packaged twice, you might get something in a plastic bottle in a plastic box that's wrapped with plastic film, and that's very wasteful. And that at the end of the day, that costs taxpayers a lot more money, and it doesn't need to be that way. And then in other places, the reason we need this law also is because with the contamination and confusion in other places, they've used this framework to really address that. So it creates the framework to fight against mislabeling and greenwashing. And at the end of the day, places like ecomaine can sell a better product if there is reduced contamination and confusion. Some examples of that contamination and confusion are on the next slide. You'll see a host of products that have been with different types of labeling. It's not consistent. Some of them are flat out wrong. And it gets to the issue of what's technically recyclable and what's practically recyclable. So right in the middle, you can see polystyrene, and we've taken care of a lot of polystyrene with our polystyrene foam food container law, but doesn't cover all polystyrene. And you can see that in the middle, it's got the number 6, but that is not recyclable at ecomaine. And those labels don't even necessarily have to do with what's practically recyclable. And you've got the film plastic bags, you've got the Tom's toothpaste containers. There's a lot of mislabeling out there. I received this tag on a plant pot over the summer that said, put this in your curbside bin. And I knew from working with Vanessa that would get sorted with paper and contaminate it because it was plastic. So there was a real need for coordination between what these products say they can do in a recycling facility and what they actually do. And it shouldn't be up to taxpayers to figure that out. I think that there's a responsibility for brand owners there too. So the law the EPR law that I'm talking about here, NRCM really advocated for it last year, and it got pretty far in the legislature. So last February, there was an 8-hour-long public hearing, and there were 163 pieces of testimony, and 73% of those were in support of the law. So there was widespread support, and we were feeling really positive about it. But unfortunately, COVID put a halt on it. So we have to do the same thing again this year. We have to work hard and bring it back, but we're feeling good about it, and we think that this is an opportunity to make it better. We're going to need the help from dedicated members like you to get the word out. So we'll have action alerts going out like we regularly do. And we'll be sending an email tomorrow with the things that you can do to help with this important law. I know this is just kind of a high level overview of it, but I am here to help you educate your community and help you every step of the way to understand this law, because it is complicated, but it's also super important. I think it's the most important thing we can do to move up the waste hierarchy here in Maine. So I hope that if you're interested, you'll get in touch with me about it. So that is that on recycling reform. We have some action steps here for you. Do you want to cover ecomaine first, Vanessa?
Sure. And yeah, just to kind of go off of what you were talking about, Chrissy, because I'm seeing some questions in the chat. So those labels, if I go back just to like look at those one more time. So a lot of them, you know, just because it has a resin code, especially for plastics, that's the one that I feel like is causing the most disruption and a lot of misconceptions in the recycling streams, is that people are not sure because, you know, a lot of manufacturers, there's no accountability as to who can put that recycling label on their plastic packaging. And just because it's made with you know, polystyrene, and they're going to throw that little symbol on there, and that's going to cause confusion. So that symbol, I think a lot of people are confused about what it really means. And so it means that it's made with a specific type of plastic resin, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it can be put into a curbside recycling program or a municipal recycling program. A lot of these things, you know, it might be eligible for a specialty type of recycling. But like Chrissy said, you know, there's, you know, what can really feasibly be recycled here in Maine is different than what could be hypothetically recycled at some plant, maybe in Texas. We just don't have the markets nearby, and it just doesn't make sense for Mainers to recycle things like expanded polystyrene, because the closest place to degas and process that material is in New Jersey. And we would have to send, you know, 18-wheeler trucks all the way to New Jersey to degas this styrofoam to take that and recycle it. So we want to encourage people to reduce, reuse, recycle what they can, but also we want to put pressure on these manufacturers to have clearer labeling, to push their material up the hierarchy too, and ensure recyclability of their products where they're sending them to. So if we're going to put a recycling symbol on something in the state of Maine, we want that to actually mean something. So that's something that I think our advocacy, you know, in this joint effort, we really want to put pressure on the people who have control over these packaging materials to take ownership of them and consider end of life and consider the plants that they're actually getting sent to realistically in their states. So yeah, just to kind of emphasize what Chrissy was saying, because it is very frustrating, because we get lots of calls from residents saying that, you know, they got this new package in the mail and it says you can put it in the curbside recycling bin, like looking at this Renew liner over here. A lot of meal delivery kits have this stuff in there. And it's really confusing, and it's really discouraging for people who want to do the right thing and recycle, but they're getting misled with lots of different branding. So we definitely want to get ahead of that solution and be vocal about it.
Yeah, and you know, sort of to keep building off of that point, you know, there's some other kind of questions in the chat box about the incentives, and so so right off the bat, this particular law would incentivize companies to use materials that are recyclable, and that definition is what is readily recyclable, and that's based on the market. So it's based in like real world markets for these products, and so you know it creates this framework to sort of move them towards it. You know, we're not going to be naive. We're not going to say that it's going to change the packaging right off the bat, but we need a framework. We need to at least build something that we can start to make better, because right now there is nothing. Like there's no way for us to call up our companies and say, hey, can you just make sure that you're using readily recyclable material? Because they're going to tell you no. And I know a lot of you have probably tried to do that because you're good people and you care a lot. But this is actually sets up a stage or a framework for those companies to do that. And then there's also a huge benefit to those companies in other places, because they get that coordinating body to help them redesign their packaging so that it's more eco-friendly. Like in other countries, I know in Italy, they have case studies on their website for this law of theirs, and one particular company was able to fit 80% more product on a shipping load because they got help from this third party that would help, that's in charge of making recycling the best that it can be. And so not only did they reduce their eco footprint, but they saved a ton of money doing it too. So there are a lot of benefits from filling this gap that could come about from it.
All right. So do you want to segue to action items?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit
Okay.
about action items so we can
All right.
stay on time. I know there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here.
Yes, so many great questions. So thank you guys so much for, continuing to submit those, and, we'll comb through as many as we can. I also will leave my contact info here too. So for the specific recycling related questions, if we don't get to all of those, I will dedicate some time to kind of hashing away at some of those. And I think Chrissy and I will look at these questions after and maybe send something out in an email potentially. So we'll try to get those answers to you in short order. But let's talk about action items, because there are some things that you guys can do from the comfort of your couch or your office or wherever you are right now that you could do to help kind of drive this initiative forward. So for ecomaine, things you can do for us to help us recycle better and keep that contamination at a minimum. If you're unsure where your recycling goes, check your town's website or call your town office to ask. So I have seen some comments coming in the chat, for people in specific municipalities, and some of them are ecomaine communities, but they may not be ecomaine communities for recycling. We also have a waste to energy power plant. I'm actually sitting in it right now. And that's where we take about 175,000 tons of municipal solid waste. Some of those towns that have contracts with us are just trash contracts, and their recycling goes elsewhere. So it's a good time to think about, if you don't know where your recycling goes, find out today. Send an email to your public works director, call your town office, or check and see if it's on your town's website, but find out where that facility is, who is processing that material, and really comb over what's accepted in that program. That's the first step. The second one is, if you are an ecomaine recycling community, please download the Recyclopedia on your phone, or go onto our website and use it there. Just kind of interact with it, get used to the functions on it, but try it out. Or you can print off a copy of our do and don't list. I've actually got right behind my head here, I've got some images here. We also have translated versions of that as well. So if you've got a neighbor, we've got them in French, Spanish, Arabic. We've really got an arsenal of resources for folks of all languages, and we want that to be readily accessible to folks in our communities. So download that do and don't list, download the Recyclopedia. And then the third thing that I want folks to do is to really just look at your trash more carefully, because while we wait for this legislation, there's lots of things that we can do at home. So start looking at your trash and choose one item that you're going to swap to something more sustainable today. So whether that means, you've been getting meat in a styrofoam tray, maybe we swap that out and we go with, a plastic or a metal container, something like that going forward. So just trying to make those really quick swaps. It might not even cost you anything different, but just be more mindful of the material that you're putting into the waste stream, and make one choice today and then kind of build from there. And then I'll take it over to Chrissy, and she'll talk about how you can help recycling reform.
Yeah. So we have two important action steps that you can take right now to help with recycling reform. The first is to sign our petition on our website if you haven't done that already. Don't worry, we're going to send you an email tomorrow with links to all of this stuff. So don't worry about tracking it down. You'll get it in your inbox. But there's a petition, and we promise to give those signatures to the legislature when there's a public hearing. We did that last year, and we'll do it again this year. And then, if you want to take it to the next level, what we would love for you to help us with is asking your town to adopt a municipal resolution to support recycling reform. The municipal resolution is basically a letter of support. It's non-binding for your town. If your town adopts it, that doesn't mean that they are committing to the law. It's just a formal way to communicate to the legislature that your town is educated about this, and that they want this policy. And municipal officials are very supportive of it. This is a very pro-town, pro-municipality type of law, because it takes that financial burden off the municipality and taxpayers and puts it on corporations that are making millions or billions of dollars every year, and who actually have control over the design of the packaging that we up until now have been responsible for paying for and managing for. So town officials are very supportive of this. The Maine Municipal Association is supportive of it. And, you know, I'm here to talk to your municipal officials and educate your town councils, board of selectmen, recycling committees about this in depth. So I have a whole presentation that I can give on this topic alone and help you understand what the law would do. But it's low and no risk for your municipality, and it's an official way for your town to support it. Right now we have about 20 towns that have already adopted it, and those towns represent over 200,000 Mainers. We have another 10 or 15 towns that are working on it. So the more we can get, the better, because we want the legislature to know that Maine's town officials understand this law and that they realize how important it is for our tax coffers and also for making recycling the best that it can be. You know, we've had a goal of recycling 50% or more of our municipal solid waste for over 30 years, and we've never reached it. But places that do have this law, places in Europe, places in Canada, they regularly see recycling rates well over 50%. And it's because they have a well-funded program that all stakeholders are involved in making recycling the best that it can be. And it's not just taxpayers acting as the safety net for this waste stream. And, you know, if you haven't already signed up for our action alerts, because we will have messages coming up when the time is right for how to take action to sort of put pressure on your legislators, let them know that you support this. And again, you'll get that email tomorrow with all my contact information in it, and you can give me a call and I'd be happy to talk more with you about these things. Oh, and I see a question in the box. On our website, there are examples of the municipal resolutions. And again, we'll send a link to you with those, but you can see all the communities that have done it on our website already.
All right, cool. So thank you guys so much for your time. I'm gonna just put my contact information on here and just leave that up for folks, if that's okay. Yeah, you've got my direct phone line here at ecomaine, so you can call me up if you have questions. We also have our social media outlets here. So follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, like us on Facebook, get those updates. We'll also let people know about events that we might be having, maybe our open house in the spring, in the fall, you know, those kinds of things. And you can email me with questions kind of after all of this. If you have some residual questions that you forgot to ask, you know, maybe you sit on this information for a day or two and you're like, oh man, I really should have asked this question. Feel free to email me. But we're going to do our best to kind of sift through all of the really wonderful, amazing questions that you guys have had. So thank you guys so much for, you know, for being here and participating. And, you know, again, we really want to make this successful and make recycling systems successful, and we need your help to do that. So please get involved, and you know, I'm sure NRCM is well equipped to get you guys on the right track.
Yeah, I put the website, recyclingreform.org is our website. I put that in the chat in case you're eager to go there right now. Recyclingreform.org will take you to all the recycling reform issues, all the recycling reform resources we have, excuse me. So with that, Vanessa, do you want to tackle these questions? We got a lot. So I'm
Yes,
going to start. We've got a lot. I don't know if you can pull up the Q&A box, but it looks like people are putting most of their questions in there.
Yeah.
A lot of material specific questions. So I don't know how you want to tackle these. We got maybe you want to tackle the ones on paper first, because it seems like those are in the top.
Yeah. So I heard about, there's one about envelopes and there's one about mail. So there was a theme there. We can take the envelopes, they can have the window in them. Up to you if you want to take that film out. That's just going to be a residue. We can accept them with or without that little window in the envelopes. But yeah, those are totally fine. You don't necessarily need to go through the envelopes and like pull out all the junk mail that you might have in there. You can put the, you know, I take my junk mail and I just put it right in the recycling bin. But if you really want to kind of remove that residue early on, you can take that out and put that right in the trash at home. Let's see. So yeah, you don't need to sort out your mail. just put it right in the recycling bin and you're good to go.
How about the labels on an aluminum soup can?
Yes. So if you would like to recycle that paper, you would want to peel that off. If it's still attached to the soup can, it's not really a contaminant because when they go to melt down that metal, it's just going to burn that paper off. But then we can't recover the paper. So if you want to take that paper off the outer, that outer ring, you can take that off and put that in the recycling bin separately, or you can just leave it right on the can. It's totally up to you, your preference. It doesn't cause us any additional grief if the labels are on. And from what I hear, it actually helps them, melt that faster because that paper burning it off kind of gets that temp up a little bit. So I don't think it's totally an issue either way. On or off is totally good to go. Let's see, what else we got? Somebody asked about paper. So if it rips, so this is a good question for like things like pet food bags and some of those, wrapping paper, especially around the holidays. We use this test a lot. Is if it rips, if it's paper and it rips, it can generally go in the recycling bin. The follow-up question that you have, Henriette, was about waxed paper, and that is not something that we can accept at ecomaine because the wax is so embedded in the fibers that when we go to recycle that, we actually can't get those fibers out. And so that makes it virtually impossible for us to actually recover the paper. So waxed paper, some composting facilities can take that depending on what the wax is, but it's not something that we can recycle here. The same would go for waxed cardboard. So those wax materials, we don't want those here, but if they, let's say for like a milk carton, that's a thin layer of plastic that can actually be removed when they go to recycle it. So we can take those. The way to check is to take your fingernail and to just scratch the outside of the container. If you want to know if it's wax, you'll have buildup underneath your fingernail when you scratch. If it doesn't, if there's no buildup under your nail, that means it's a plastic liner and that can go in the recycling bin. But generally speaking, we're not seeing a lot of waxed paper anymore. It's usually like the deli paper and like more of the produce boxes, those waxed cardboard boxes and things like that. Or like a Dixie cup for mouthwash in the bathroom, like those types of things, not recyclable. But most of the time it's transitioned a lot to more of those plastic coatings, which can then be recycled. So those are fine. Let's see, somebody asked about bottle caps, which is another common question. If you have a plastic water bottle and a plastic cap, I recommend just leaving those together. Somebody also asked about what if the container itself doesn't have or has the symbol on it, but the lid doesn't. That's okay. As long as those items are together, they're going to find a home in the plastics recycling and they'll get sorted and processed just fine. So bottle caps and lids, if you're plastic on plastic, leave them together because then they'll find their home. But otherwise, if you have to separate the lid, that should go into the trash. Let's see. Yeah, so bottle caps are a pretty easy one. So just leave those on because otherwise they're just too tiny and they fall through all of our equipment and they litter our floor. At the end of every day, they go around and they have to sweep up all the bottle caps off the bottom of the floor in the recycling plant because they just never get to their home. And we could send them through the plant 100 times and they would make it none of the times, unfortunately. Let's see. Yeah, a couple people had asked about Kittery, and it sounds like Kittery's recycling program is not with ecomaine. They take the 1 through 5s. They're a little bit more selective on what they can take. And that's just because they have a different program, and different recycling programs have different markets. So we've got, specific buyers that we work with and we've built relationships with over time. Different facilities have different buyers for their products. And so some of them may not have a buyer for, plastics numbers 3 through 7. And so they might not accept those. So that's why it's really important to check with your local facility and just make sure that you're on the same page so that you're avoiding contamination when you put an item in the bin. You want to make sure you know the rules so that you're not accidentally, wish cycling in that program. So yeah, for example, Kittery was one that a couple of people have brought up.
So there's a couple of questions that I can answer about recycling reform, and it's actually the first question that I always get, and that is sort of like, what are the drawbacks to businesses, and how will that affect consumer prices? Because there's this common misperception that that those costs are automatically going to be passed on to consumers, and we've done a lot of digging on this issue because we've never seen any evidence of that, and we wanted proof that that claim actually can be substantiated, and we've never found any proof. We've talked to a lot of experts around the world about this issue, and people who deliver this program in Canada have told us that it is not the case. One of the reasons, there's a lot of complicated reasons, because prices are complicated. What goes into making a price is not so straightforward, but really what it comes down to is that these programs cost fractions of a penny, and those costs are split up between thousands of corporations that have a lot of money. So there isn't evidence, and one real world example is actually our neighbors over in Nova Scotia. Their municipal association, which is sort of equivalent to our Maine Municipal Association, is lobbying their own provincial government to adopt EPR precisely because their neighbors in Quebec get the benefit of having corporations pay for their recycling programs because they have EPR, and prices are the same between both provinces, except in Nova Scotia, taxpayers have to pay for managing the waste that these corporations introduce into the communities. So, and then along with that, people in British Columbia have told us that no, prices are not being affected. So there's that. And then as far as businesses go, Maine businesses, most Maine businesses, most small Maine businesses are going to be exempt. So this really is meant to target the people who are making the most waste. Those big corporations like our grocery stores, like Walmart, like Amazon, it targets them. You can see some of the exemptions on our website, I believe. But basically, if you have fewer than 100 full-time employees, if you make less than a ton of waste, and if you're a nonprofit, all of these businesses are going to be exempted. And it's really the 100 or fewer full-time employees that exempts the large majority of Maine's businesses. So again, it's really meant to target those big corporations that are really doing the bulk of the damage here.
All right, I am getting lots of questions about plastic films, so I'm gonna talk about that. I think we got like 5 or 6 questions with about the same topic. So a lot of people asking about what to do with plastic bags, and some of the retailers are taking them, and what happens to those bags. And again, this is why it's really important to talk about markets, and different types of recycling programs have different types of markets. So for example, I showed you kind of what happens to plastic bags when they come into our facility. They get commingled with all this material, with paper, with other plastics, with all sorts of other stuff. And then more often than not, they get tangled in our equipment. Now, at a retailer, they have a lot more control over what types of materials are going into that bin, because it's just a drop-off location at a grocery store. So they can just look in that bin and say, oh, well, somebody threw a coffee cup in here, I'm going to take that out. And their material is much cleaner. There's less opportunity to commingle with other things. And it stays pretty pure. This is just plastic bags in one bin. Now they have a market. A lot of companies, just one for example, like Trex Decking, they purchase those plastic bags from the retailers. Companies like Hannaford will sell them to companies like Trex Decking, and they'll take that and turn it into their plastic outdoor decking, or their composite lumber. So they have a different market for that material. It does get recycled, and that's actually because of a Maine state statute. So policy actually helped dictate and create a recycling market for these materials, because a lot of people were getting them and they were just doomed for a landfill. So Maine state statute actually requires retailers, if they're giving you plastic bags and films, they are obligated by the state statute to take them back to recycle. And they actually have to be somewhere, you know, within, I think it's like 20 yards from the main entrance. So they have to be accessible to the public as well. So that's something that's in Maine state statute that kind of enforces these retailers to accept and recycle the material. And they stay a lot cleaner that way because it's a specialty recycling program versus putting it in the single sort, and then it ends up getting tangled up in our equipment, and then we can't sell it and find homes for it. So it actually ensures that they do get recycled if you use those programs instead of putting them, you know, by mistake or you know, with misconceptions into the recycling programs in your municipality. So lots of questions about that. I've also heard some good questions about, let's see, bottle redemption. We highly recommend that you use that and cash in that deposit, because otherwise that money is gone. Once, you know, you've paid that deposit, you've earned it, get it back when you recycle it. You know, we will take those bottles and cans. We have a couple communities from New Hampshire, just over the border in Newington and Greenland, that send us their single sort recycling materials. And so those that don't have a bottle bill, they'll give us all of that material, all those, you know, number one soda bottles and water bottles and all of that stuff will end up in our recycling stream. But we do encourage folks here in Maine, if you're paying that 5 cents, get that 5 cents back and recycle them at a redemption center. Use a process like Clink. And they also have different markets for those because they're all food grade containers. So with us, we're mixing, you know, our number one beverage containers with things like mouthwash, and those are not necessarily that food grade quality. So they have a higher standard for their containers and have different markets for them because of that. So use those programs as much as you can and get your 5 cents back. Let's see, are there other questions we can answer?
Sorry, Vanessa, did you cover about the size of a material, like, and about like how that can affect?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I talked a little bit about how like bottle caps and stuff are just a little too small. They fall through all of our equipment. So we do kind of have, you know, a window of sizes that are appropriate. Somebody asked about cardboard boxes and said that their program requires them to break them down into 2 square foot kind of blocks. And for us, that's not necessary. But we do we ask folks to keep the size of the containers that they're recycling. So like your plastics and that sort of thing. Break down your cardboard boxes when you can. But we're looking for things that are larger than the palm of your hand and smaller, or the size of a 5-gallon bucket or smaller. Cardboard's a little different because it's just gonna it's going to surf over the top of that rubber star and it's going to go into a bale, and it's not a big deal. If it's a, you know, a refrigerator box or something like that, it's okay. If you want to break it down to get it into your cart or to get it into the bin, that's all right too. But we don't require anyone to kind of cut it down to a specific spec size. Just, you know, make sure it's manageable and not too huge that we can't, you know, fill the rest of a truck with recycling. But yeah, we do have kind of a threshold for sizes. If it's, you know, we don't want laundry hampers or anything, you know, massive, but we do want, you know, kind of within that maybe sticky note size or the size of the palm of your hand to a 5-gallon bucket. That's like our sweet spot.
So I'm just scrolling up to make sure we've covered, I think we've covered most of the questions. Just making sure that we haven't missed any. Now, did you touch on the tech packs, the pack tax from the beer cans?
I don't think I have yet, so I can certainly do that. So very similar to plastic lids. The reason we can't accept those is because they're very light, fluffy, and flat, and they do behave like paper in our screens, and they float right over the top with our paper and get mixed up in our bales. So that's something that we can accept, even if it does have that symbol on it. I know a lot of people will say that they've seen that. There are some take back programs for PakTechs, particularly with the breweries. And we've been working with them kind of in partnership to try to find a solution. It's been difficult because there's very limited recycling options for those PakTechs, but they do exist. So that's something that we're trying to work directly with the breweries to try to consolidate the PakTechs and try to find a good recycling solution for them. But that's a great example of how we can work together with these producers, the people who are putting this packaging out there, to find solutions, because maybe they didn't know that a facility like ecomaine couldn't accept them. So we can work together to try to find a way to either make them recyclable or use our networks of our manufacturers and our plants that we work with to try to find a home for this material and keep it out of the landfill. So it's not something that we can take, unfortunately, at this point in time. But who knows what could happen when we all work together and kind of problem solve these things all together.
Yeah, and I think the PakTechs are a great example. I know a lot of breweries take them back and they're working hard to do the right thing with those materials because they can't go in your curbside bin. And I think that recycling reform can help level the playing field a little bit because our brewers are doing that work and it does have a cost, but other beverage producers aren't doing that. Budweiser isn't doing it. So recycling reform can help level the playing field because the people who are doing the right thing are doing it, just out of the goodness of their heart, but really everybody should be doing that. So that's a sort of another way to look at it, and how having this middle party to make recycling the best that it can be, how important that is. I think, we're about at 12:30. I think it's a good time to wrap it up. One of Juka from Brunswick is talking about masks in the chat, and she makes a big point, and I think I just want to end on this point, is that we have to reduce at the end of the day. Like, this is so important, all this stuff about how to recycle, right? But if we can reduce our use, that's the most important thing. So try as much as you can to use reusables in your life, but while you're also being a recycle ecomaniac. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope your questions were answered and that you enjoyed the inside look. Again, just want to reiterate one more time, Vanessa and I are very accessible, so please don't hesitate to reach out. We love talking trash. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any more questions or if you'd like help in your community. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys, so much.